Hey everyone, it's Nico from the blog documentingsimpleliving.com, where I talk about simplifying food, self-care, and consumption in the modern world. Today I am making 2 tinctures that are beneficial to your immune system, and I wanted to share the process with you because I am just getting into tinctures. I'm learning how to make them in real time in this video. So if that is something of interest to you, follow along. A tincture is an herbal concentrate that you make by putting an herb or a flower into a glass jar and pouring alcohol over top of it, putting a lid onto it, and letting it sit in a cool, dark place for 4 to 6 weeks, and then straining it off and bottling the liquid. Then you have a tincture. The beneficial compounds that are in herbs and flowers are extracted by the alcohol when you make a tincture, and then when you consume the tincture, you're able to absorb those beneficial compounds in your own body. The tinctures I'm making today are supporting your immune system, but you can make tinctures for all sorts of different things. I've bought tinctures from some herbalists that I know that are supportive of promoting sleep, reducing anxiety, and that sort of thing. Tinctures are just a really simple way of extracting some of the beneficial compounds from herbs and flowers and making them digestible to your body and preserving them for a longer time than the flower or the herb would usually last. So today I am making 2 tinctures. One is an elderberry tincture, and the other is an echinacea tincture. Elderberries are known to have really high vitamin C levels. I'm sure you might have heard of elderberry syrup. It's quite common these days to make elderberry syrup. Echinacea and elderberries sort of do the same thing. I'm making them for the same purpose, I should say, which is to be able to have something on hand that I can take quickly if I feel like I'm getting sick. So to make the elderberry tincture, I used a pint mason jar and poured about 1.5 cups of dried elderberries into that jar. Now you can of course use fresh elderberries. They would probably be better, but I didn't have any on hand. So if you have fresh elderberries, use about 1 cup of fresh elderberries and put them into a saucepan with just a tiny bit of water and turn it on to low heat and just simmer until some of the liquids start to come out of the elderberries. Raw elderberries can be irritating to the bowel, so by simmering them just a bit, it helps to prevent that. And another thing with fresh elderberries is to make sure that you remove them from the stem completely. So you don't want any stems in your tincture because for the same reason, it's mildly toxic and can irritate your bowel. So just make sure all the fresh elderberries are removed from the stems and do a few minutes of simmering them on the stove. And then you can just follow along with the same process I'm going to describe for making elderberry tincture with dried elderberries. So for dried elderberries, I just put mine into my pint jar, about 1.5 cups, and then I just covered them with vodka. I like to use 80 proof vodka, so like 40% alcohol. And I just poured in enough vodka to cover the elderberries so they were all submerged. And then I screwed a lid on tight and gave it a good shake. I'm going to put this jar in my pantry where it's away from sunlight and a bit cooler. When they're brewing, you want to store them in a dark and cool place away from sunlight. So this is what it looks like at the moment. Another tip is that you're supposed to shake the jar every day. I plan to be in my pantry every day, so I'm sure I'll see it and give it a quick shake. But it's just to help everything come out of the elderberries and to combine with the alcohol. So the next tincture I made was Echinacea tincture. And this one I definitely learned a lesson while making. So you can make this again with dried or fresh Echinacea flowers. You can use the root, the stem, the leaves, the flower itself. You can use all parts of the flower for this, which is wonderful. I don't have fresh Echinacea flowers, so I used dried Echinacea. If you're using fresh flowers, just fill up whatever jar you're using with the fresh flowers. Cut the flower, cut the stem so it fits into the jar, and then just simply cover it with alcohol, just as we did with the elderberry tincture. With dried Echinacea, I made the mistake of, that's what mine looks like, it's completely full. I made the mistake of filling this pint jar full of dried Echinacea and then pouring vodka over that. So this is probably, when it was dried, it was probably 1.5 cups. Now, what I should have realized is that when you pour vodka over a dry herb, or when you pour liquid over a dry herb, it's going to absorb the liquid and you'll need a lot more liquid. I ended up using basically my entire bottle of vodka for this little pint jar because the dried Echinacea soaked it all up immediately. So what I'd recommend if you're using dried like me is to fill this jar about 1/4 of the way full. So if you're using a pint jar, 1/4 of the pint jar, quart jar, a 1/4 of the quart jar, etc. And then covering it with vodka. And you'll notice that you'll need to put in more vodka after like 30 minutes or so. Just keep an eye on the dried herb, and you want to just make sure that whenever the Echinacea has absorbed as much liquid as it's going to, make sure that you have liquid on top of that as well. So everything is still submerged. What you don't want is to go back to your jar and open it and you have like Echinacea that is not in the alcohol, because the whole point is that the alcohol is preserving the herb and preventing bad bacteria from growing. So you want to make sure everything is always under the alcohol. So if I had gone back, I would have of course used far less dried Echinacea when making this tincture. But nonetheless, I tighten the lid on this little jar and I'll set it next to my elderberries in my pantry, and then go back to it in about 4 or 6 weeks. So yeah, the next step after you put your lid on it is store it in a cool, dark place and then try to shake it once a day. Then after 4 weeks, use cheesecloth or a strainer to strain off the solids, which you can then compost or throw away. And then you collect the liquid and you store the liquid, which is the tincture, in a little bottle like this, but it has a dropper in it. The amber ones are the best because they help prevent UV light from penetrating the glass and weakening the beneficial compounds in the tincture. If you can find amber glass bottle with a dropper, that's the best. The dropper is useful because usually, from what I've read online, a dosage for a tincture for an adult is a dropper full. So you can just take out a dropper and give yourself the tincture that way. You don't have to worry about measuring a teaspoon or something. Now, I will say that the most challenging part for me this time making a tincture was that I didn't have a funnel. So to get the actual tincture liquid into the bottle was very challenging. I used a funnel that was too big. What I would recommend is trying to find a funnel that has a spout that's small enough to fit into one of these bottles that comes with a dropper, but is big enough to be able to catch the liquid as you pour it from your bowl. Now, in terms of dosage for both the elderberry tincture and the Echinacea tincture, what I've read online and what I plan to do is take 1 dropper full whenever I feel a cold coming on or have a cold, 3 times a day. So 1 dropper full 3 times a day. And you can take it straight, like just take the dropper and put it into your mouth. But you can, put it into any food you're having. If you're having oats or cereal or, whatever, you can put it into any food you're having. Or you can put it into tea or coffee or juice or your water, anything. I'm genuinely curious what they taste like, so I'm just planning to take it straight. If you're planning to give any sort of tincture like this to your children, do your own research on dosage for that. There is information online for that, but I'm just not planning to do that. I have a recipe for elderberry gummies on this website that I make elderberry syrup and then make that syrup into gummies, which I'll give to my children. So I'll do that instead. If you're not signed up to my newsletter, I would encourage you to sign up for it. I send out regular, really actionable, short emails with tips to simplify your life in one way or another. This is one way I'm trying to simplify, trying to understand how to use the herbs and plants and flowers around us in the natural world to promote our own health. But if you're interested in that sort of thing, I would really encourage you to sign up to the newsletter. There's a link to subscribe in the description below. Until next time, thank you for stopping by, and I'll speak to you in the next Documenting Simple Living video.